Before the champagne even settled, something went wrong. At exactly 6:12 a.m. Eastern, while Washington was celebrating, Canada was already 3 moves ahead, and nobody in the room noticed. Here's the thing most people are still missing. The side that declares victory first almost never wins. Trump's team lit up social media. Cable panels roared. Clips went viral. Every headline said the same thing. America had won. But if you actually read the fine print, the trade data, the diplomatic channels, the quiet cabinet memos coming out of Ottawa, you'd see something completely different. Canada didn't panic. Canada didn't blink. Canada waited. And in geopolitics, waiting is a weapon. If this is already making your head spin, subscribe and hit the bell. This story is moving faster than any headline can keep up with, and I'm tracking every move in real time. Now I need to show you something that almost nobody is talking about. Because buried inside the trade retaliation framework Canada is deploying, there's a mechanism so precise, so coldly engineered, that trade analysts are calling it a surgical strike. Not on goods, not on tariffs, on something far more personal to the American economy. I'll show you exactly what that is in just a moment. But first, you need to understand why the victory lap was premature in the first place. Here's how trade retaliation actually works, and why most people have it completely backwards. When country A slaps tariffs on country B, the assumption is that country B absorbs the pain and eventually folds. That's the theory. That's the movie version. The reality is slower, uglier, and far more dangerous for the country that moved first. Canada is America's largest trading partner. Not China, not Mexico. Canada. $900 billion in cross-border trade every single year. Energy, autos, agriculture, aluminum, steel. The two economies aren't just linked, they're fused. And when you try to rip fused things apart, both sides bleed. But here's the asymmetry nobody's explaining. Canada can choose where it bleeds. America cannot. Ottawa has spent the last several months quietly cataloging every congressional district where Canadian trade is the economic spine, where Canadian aluminum holds up American factories, where Canadian energy keeps the lights on, where Canadian lumber is the difference between a construction boom and a housing crisis. They built a map, a targeted, deliberate, district-by-district pressure map, and now they're using it. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. The next section is where this gets genuinely alarming for the American side, and you'll want to be here for all of it. That map is the surgical strike I mentioned. But here's what's even more unsettling. It's only phase 1, because Canada's real leverage isn't tariffs. It isn't counter tariffs. It's something that doesn't make headlines until it's already too late to stop. Stay with me because I'm going to show you the exact domino sequence. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's make this real. Let's talk about you. Not abstract trade policy, not GDP graphs, you. If you work in American manufacturing, particularly auto parts, steel fabrication, or aluminum processing, the next 90 days will determine whether your plant gets a contract renewal or starts talking about workforce restructuring. That's the polite word. If you own a small business that relies on cross-border supply chains, and there are millions of them, your cost of goods is already creeping up. Quietly, invisibly. The way inflation always starts before anyone puts a name on it. If you have a retirement portfolio, a 401k, a pension, any equity exposure, the sectors most vulnerable to this dispute are the ones institutional investors are quietly reducing right now. And if you just buy groceries, pay energy bills, run a household, that's the word. One word. Because what gets lost inside the geopolitical theater, the press conferences, the victory laps, the cable panel screaming matches, is that every tariff is ultimately a tax, and taxes eventually find their way to you. The question isn't if you'll feel this, the question is how much, and that depends entirely on what happens in the next 24 to 72 hours. Now, here's the part almost nobody is willing to say out loud. Because what Canada is doing, this calculated, quiet, surgical retaliation, isn't just about this trade dispute. It's about something bigger. It's about whether the architecture of every Western alliance survives spectacle politics. And there's a document, a set of internal coordination signals between Canada, the EU, and 2 other major economies that suggests the next move won't come from Ottawa at all. It'll come from somewhere you're not watching. I'll name it in a moment. In Let's talk about the human chess match happening at the top. Trump's instinct is the big swing, the dramatic announcement, the headline that makes you feel like something decisive just happened. And tactically, he's not wrong. Dominant signaling works in negotiation, in markets, in politics. The problem is that it only works when the other side believes the signal is backed by sustained will and a clear end state. Canada's leadership is playing a different game entirely. They are not emotional. They are institutional. They've been through NAFTA renegotiations, softwood lumber fights, dairy disputes, border crises. They know that American political attention cycles are short. They know that congressional midterms are always 18 months away. They know that the longer this drags, the more American domestic pressure builds on the side that started the fight. So Canada's strategy is deceptively simple. Don't escalate. Don't de-escalate. Make the cost of continuing higher than the cost of settling. It's a patience game. And historically, the patient side wins. Smash that like button if you're starting to see why the victory declaration was so premature. What I'm about to show you next, the receipts, is the part that will genuinely change how you're reading every headline going forward. Let me show you what the receipts actually say. Receipt 1. In the 48 hours after the tariff announcement, Canadian dollar volatility spiked, but so did U.S. Treasury yields. The bond market wasn't celebrating. It was pricing in uncertainty. That's not a Canadian problem. That's a both sides problem. Receipt 2. 3 of the 5 largest U.S. automakers quietly flagged supply chain review protocols in their internal communications. Not publicly, quietly. Because Canadian auto parts are not discretionary. They're structural. Receipt 3. Energy economists, not partisans, economists, are projecting that prolonged trade friction in the energy corridor could add between 0.12 and 0.19 to the average American's cost per gallon of gasoline. Compounded over a year, that's a political problem, not just an economic one. Receipt 4. The EU issued a statement of concern. Diplomatic language for we're watching and we're ready. That coordination signal I mentioned, it runs through Brussels. The receipts don't lie. They just don't always make the same headlines as the victory lap. Here's the sequence if this doesn't resolve in the next 72 hours. Canada formalizes its targeted retaliation against politically sensitive congressional districts. Republican members in manufacturing-heavy swing districts start receiving calls from factory owners. Those factory owners aren't ideological. They're practical. They want the disruption to end. That congressional pressure quietly reaches the White House. Not loudly. Not as a news story. As a whisper campaign inside the building. Meanwhile, the EU, watching how America treats its closest ally, begins accelerating its own trade diversification strategy. Not to punish America, to protect Europe. The lesson they're drawing is simple. If Canada can be hit like this, so can we. Better to reduce dependency now. Canada, emboldened by European coordination, signals it's prepared for a longer standoff than originally projected. And at that moment, the moment the other side signals it can outlast you, the negotiating position of the side that moved first collapses. Not dramatically, not with a press conference, just quietly, like air out of a tire. There are 2 roads from here. Path 1, a negotiated settlement. Both sides quietly walk something back. Call it a framework, call it a review mechanism. Give both leaders a press conference where they can claim something. Markets stabilize. Supply chains reabsorb the shock. The story disappears from the headlines by next quarter. This is the likely path. But, and this is critical, the longer the victory lap continues, the harder it becomes for either side to take path 1 without losing face. And saving face in geopolitics is sometimes more important than saving money. Path 2. The standoff extends. European coordination deepens. The targeted congressional pressure builds into public legislative pushback. American consumers start feeling the costs in their daily lives. At the pump, at the grocery store, in their quarterly 401k statements. And a trade dispute that started as a headline becomes a political liability that nobody in Washington knows how to own. I think we are leaning carefully, cautiously toward path 1, but the window is narrowing. And every hour the victory lap continues, that window gets smaller. Here's where I land. This isn't a story about tariffs. It's a story about the gap between declared reality and actual reality? And what happens when that gap gets too wide to manage? 3 questions I want you to sit with. And I want you to drop your answers in the comments because I genuinely read every single one. 1. Is Trump's declaration of victory a negotiating tool or a political trap he's now locked inside? 2. Is Canada's patience a sign of strategic discipline, or is there a point where it tips into its own kind of recklessness? 3. And the biggest one, can any alliance survive a world where spectacle politics moves faster than facts? If you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. This story isn't over, not even close. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Because what happens in the next 72 hours could completely rewrite everything I just told you.